Hello world, how are you doing? What do you think? I treated myself to home hair dye the other week and I've been waiting for a good opportunity to do it because I was looking such a mess. The greyness is just like full on now, but it's like it might just be because it's only I can see it, but it all seems to be at the front and it just looks a wreck. These bits are getting longer, and when they're a bit longer I'm going to chop all my hair up to match that. Decided I'm going to do it. I'm just waiting to find someone who can do it for me, because although I trim the ends of all my hair, I'm not confident about doing the whole lot. I think it needs someone who's a bit more experienced than me. I was doing my cleaning job this morning, a couple of hours. I went in really early because yet another hot day is going to persist today, although I think it's going to break soon, so I wanted to get in there quick because the building is like a greenhouse. And I make podcast playlists on my phone while I'm in there because it's a great way to find the time to catch up on podcasts. And I was listening to a really interesting podcast this morning, which I shall link below, it was kind of about identity. So they highlighted one case of a chap he was a professional rock climber. I didn't know there was such a thing. And that was his life, that was his identity. And then he had a woodworking accident and he chopped a finger off, which is just horrific. But apparently you can't be a rock climber without all your digits. So he had to completely rethink his entire life because his whole life revolved around climbing stones, basically, for want of a better analogy. Which he did. He found other ways to reinvent himself. But they also talked about things like, it could be your hobbies, it can be your career, it can be your finances. And it reminded me how fragile your finances can be when you put everything into the same pot. So particularly during the pandemic, when people lost their jobs or were furloughed and they went from incomes to nothing because that was all they had to rely on. And you trust, or sometimes you trust that the business you work for has your best interests at heart and will look after you. I have worked for companies before who have gone under, shafted me good and proper, and suddenly you're out on a boat without a sail and you're just floating downstream aimlessly, having to find new work because it's gone from everything to zero. And it's been a long time since I have put all my money into one pot. The business that I run now, which is the fashion of the jewellery and the homeware design, started life as costume design, and I freelanced, but it was very minimal income, and it was more to do with it being a hobby that I wanted to be a business. But I was working full time, and of course those jobs come and go, and I did lose jobs because businesses went under or there were changes of structure. It happened all the time, especially when I lived down in London. They were always shutting departments and moving people around. And as I've gone on, and particularly since I went to university, which was in 2009, went to uni for 3 years, started establishing my business whilst I was at uni, came out, didn't want to go back to the full-time jobs I'd had before, so I was starting the business and accumulating work and getting income, but needed a bit more because being a creative really is difficult to make an actual full-time income out of. So I go back and do a little bit of part-time office work, or I do something else, and I do things here and there, and I just got used to spreading my income streams across a wider area. And when I first came to the Manchester area, which was back in 2015, a similar thing happened. So I brought my business with me, and that was earning, but I needed a bit more, so I did a little bit of temporary office work just to keep things ticking over. Then I got offered a job part-time running the building that my business was in, and that worked really well for, I want to say, 3 years. And then the owners decided to retire, and they sold the business on. And they said, don't worry, they promised everyone will be well looked after. Lucky believe that. And of course it wasn't. And within months, I had lost my studio. I had lost the job that I had there, which was paying great money. I didn't even need to earn money at my fashion design business because I was getting it all from doing this part-time job. I was still living really cheaply then. I was in house shares, very minimal outgoings. And I'd just taken on this flat where I am now. So I went from having a studio where I could work and have clients and do fittings and spread myself out, and a really great little lucrative part-time job, to having to squish my entire business into a spare bedroom, having no space to have clients, no space to spread out, no space to do big scale work like pattern cutting. And I no longer had the job. And now I had a flat that I had to pay what at that time was nearly £500 a month in rent for, which was more than I had been paying before. So it was the reminder that never ever trust anyone else to look after your interests. And I spent a bit of time reorientating myself, a few months, and that took me into 2019. And then I started to change the way I worked, which meant that I was earning again, and because before I hadn't needed to sell online. Everything I did was through people and word of mouth, and people would come to me, and then all that was gone. So I had to start from scratch and learn how to sell online. I already had an Etsy store, but I hadn't really used it. Now suddenly it was my only potential outlet for what I did. So all into that. 2019 was looking good. It was picking up. I mean, it was slow, of course it was. It wasn't an overnight miracle. And I learned how to really cut back on my way of life, because now I was in my own place for the first time. I was in full control. I have a water meter. I was in control of my energy usage, the food that I bought. And gradually over time, up to this point, I've honed my frugality skills to the point that I'm at now. And so through 2019, things were looking really good. Business was picking up. I was making a lot more stuff because I was working from home now, so I could just dip into work whenever I chose to. And then, of course, 2020 happened. And I managed to pivot my business to sell what people needed, which was, people got really into crafting because they were stuck at home because they'd lost their jobs, they were on furlough, they couldn't leave the house. And I had a studio, or a spare bedroom, full of craft materials, a lot of which wasn't really suitable for my business anymore, because I'd started to change the way I worked and the way I designed because of my lack of space. So I put everything onto Etsy and did well. I had a good year in 2020 thanks to the interest in crafting during lockdowns. So that helped me through, and it taught me that, you know, you need to think on your feet and you need to do things differently. And of course, once we came out of that towards the end of 2020 and 2021, business started to go downhill because people no longer were interested in crafting, they were going out again. Things did start to pick up. I started to get dress purchases, jewellery, because people were starting to go out and do stuff again. But it never got back to where it was. And this is where I started to think about other income streams. Not wanting to go back to the office. So I started looking at things like, as well as cutting right down on my outgoings so that I had a meeting point in the middle. Less out, hopefully more in, and meeting in the middle. So I started doing the surveys and things like that. And it's just thinking like that has always protected me financially. Being really careful with savings, always having a pot of emergency savings to cover anything, any shortfall, any issues. and that's been an incredibly important buffer zone. And of course, those savings are also earning me a small passive income. And my income streams have grown over time with the zero spend food challenge that I'm doing, because I am shopping for free and then reclaiming money, for instance, on the cashback apps. That is now also a small income. And the surveys work has increased, the market research which I found through doing the surveys, that has increased, and I get a small income from that. And now this year, the crunch of business is really bad now. I've lost now 3/4 of my income thanks to just the way the economic situation is going. But now I have 2 new income streams, because I now have the cleaning work and I have the clinical trials work, and both of those have scope to earn a lot more money. I've only just started on both of those in the last month, so they're very new, but both have lots of growth potential. So I still have the business, I have the passive income, I have the surveys and the market research, I have the cleaning job, and now I have the clinical trials. So that's 5 income streams that I am on at the moment, putting aside other little bits of money that I might make from, selling personal stuff like wardrobe clear out, selling books, things like that. It's small fry, but it all goes into the pot and it all adds up. So if you're worried about your single income, you're worried about your job, you're worried about that bubble bursting, or if it's just looking shaky, don't sit around and wait for it to happen, because when it happens, you will be left high and dry and there won't be anybody helping you. You can't rely on the government systems to help you, they won't bail you out. You can't rely on the benefit system, which really doesn't want to pay out anything anymore, because there are going to be so many cutbacks coming. And we already know that, for instance, Universal Credit is absolutely determined not to give you any money. So do look at how you can minimise that damage. There's lots of work out there in, say, self-employed land, gig economy. A lot of it, like the sort of stuff I do, is very home-based. If you do have emergency savings put away, make them work for you. There are some really good savings accounts out there. You can get instant access at 5%. You can lock away for, 7 or 8%, depending on how risk averse you are. You can sit there with your phone all weekend and do surveys. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it all makes a difference. And then if you get those established, if something happens to your work, your hours are cut, something happens and you lose your job, there is something else going on, and then the other work that you then need to fill the gap doesn't have to be as big, because you have already started to fill some of that gap. But these things take time. You can't just magically walk into new income streams. I know that people earn from writing online, writing articles and things like that. I've never been able to find any work like that. People talk about starting YouTube channels and making money. It takes a long time to earn anything from a YouTube channel. You have to have a lot of followers. You have to have a lot of view time. And then the income comes from the ads that are put in front of people when they watch your channel. So it's down to ad companies as well, and it depends on your viewership. So you cannot rely on these, what might be considered passive incomes. You're not going to become an overnight success. You have to work at it. The agency work is good. They're easy to walk into. I was registered in a couple of weeks, and a week later I got the cleaning job that I've got now, and I have lots of scope for that. And it's really easy. I mean, it's 4 hours a week. It's over the road. I got lucky with a local company. I do 2 hours midweek. I'll do a couple of hours at the weekend. So, for instance, Saturday morning, I went over there at 9 o'clock because I was in the mood for it. I was ready. The building's closed all weekend, so it's just all mine. Did that couple of hours. I was back home just after 11. Sorted my hair, had my lunch, and now I get the rest of the weekend to myself. So you can make this work for you, but don't put all your financial eggs in one basket. Don't be tied to one identity, because things can change really fast. And that's my thought for the day. Thank you for watching. Oh, like and subscribe. Thank you.